Well, it's a disturbing story that is hard to understand. Chinese police are now on the hunt for a woman suspected of plucking out the eyes of a 6-year-old boy. Police were able to recover the child's eyes, but there are conflicting reports about whether the corneas were removed. Of course, China has a history of human organ trafficking fueled by massive waiting lists for transplants. Daniel Wikler is a professor at Harvard School of Public Health with a specialty in global health ethics. He joins us now from Boston. Good morning. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning.
Maybe you can give us a sense of how big a problem organ trafficking is in China.
It's a problem worldwide. The United States is not completely innocent of it. I don't know of cases in Canada, but in poor parts of the world, unfortunately, there are many, many thousands of cases each year. What this usually involves is not something as dramatic as the case that was initially presented to the news media in China, where a boy was actually robbed of his eyes and then sort of thrown aside. What usually happens is the people who have a client who wants an organ, this will be usually a broker working with a surgeon who was sort of operating off hours. The people who represent the client will seek out someone who can be induced to spare an organ for cash. And obviously these are usually very, very poor people. It's often a matter of just a few $1,000s, but the organ is sold to the recipient for many times that, and the middlemen pocket the difference. Now, this is, for some people, a grave wrong. It's a wrong because there are thousands of people walking around without organs that they sold in a moment of desperation. They almost never get aftercare, which some of them actually need. And most of them, apparently from surveys, regret ever having agreed to sell. But on the other hand, some of these organs are saving lives. So it's to me and to many of my colleagues a clear wrong, something that we should try to curb. And WHO is making valiant efforts to curb the international organ trade. Now, the case that we are dealing with here in China is a spectacular one because, first of all, it involves a poor child, and secondly, there's an act of violence. But from reports that I've received early this morning from colleagues in China, the idea that this child was victimized so that his corneas could be sold seems rather dubious at this point. So it's probably not a case like that. And most of these cases of involving organ trafficking don't involve violence or theft of organs. They involve inducement to very poor people. Looking at the issue in general, and perhaps not the specific case, with I guess our Western sensibility, we tend to be outraged at this type of business. If you want, if you want to. Well, I was going to ask you that. How is it regarded within countries? And again, we'll use China as an example. Well, China is a special case with organ transplantation because alone among countries in the world that have a substantial capacity for organ transplantation, China had been using organs of executed prisoners as sources for its organs. I've discussed this many times with colleagues in China, and the opinion was divided. Among the defenders, people made the claim, I think in all sincerity, that the prisoners whose organs were removed actually thought that this helped them to make up their obligation to society by giving something back. That's hard for us to believe, I think, but some of them seem to believe it. Now, just a few years ago, something remarkable happened in China. The Deputy Minister of Health, who was himself a transplant surgeon, went abroad to an international professional meeting where he met with his peers, and they convinced him on the spot that this idea of using the organs of convicted criminals was a bad idea, primarily, I think, because of the possibility that people would be executed specifically because of their organ. So when he got back to China, he introduced a measure that would curb the use of criminals' organs. And this is winding down now. It's supposed to end in a couple of years. Now, what this means for China is that they've got to look elsewhere. They have some superb facilities now for organ transplant. You can find them in major cities all around the country. But transplant begins with a human organ, and the question is where those organs are going to come from. The answer that is being urged on them by the World Health Organization and by most of their peers abroad is human cadavers, people who have been declared dead, or in the case of a country that doesn't have a brain death definition, someone who is perhaps not legally dead, but who is brain dead. These are cases in which the individual is simply not going to make any more use of their organs. But China has been slow to get off the block in developing a system for harvesting these organs, or for asking families to agree for a donation. They're doing it, and this is happening more and more, and Chinese who are being asked for this are showing a greater tendency to consider it seriously, but it's something that's going to take a while to develop.
And we'll have to leave it at that. Daniel Wikler, thank you very much for coming in and joining us from Boston this morning.
Sure.